Aqui está o roteiro completo em texto corrido, pronto para copiar e colar no 11 Labs. The fluorescent light above my head buzzed like something trapped inside it. That's the first thing I remember. Not the pain in my chest, not the paper gown crackling every time I shifted on the exam table, not even the IV they had taped to the inside of my left wrist. Just that buzz, the sound of something trying to get out. The nurse came in with a clipboard. Young woman, couldn't have been more than 30. Dark hair pulled back tight. Professional. She looked at me directly, not at him, and she asked, "Mrs. Whitaker, can you confirm who you want listed as your emergency contact?" It was a simple question. I had a simple answer. I opened my mouth to give it. Richard stepped forward. "Don't listen to her. She's confused." 4 words. He said them the way you'd note the weather. Casual. Practiced. Like he had been rehearsing them for a long time and was relieved to finally say them out loud in a room with a witness. The nurse stopped writing. She looked at him. Then she looked back at me. And I reached into my bag. What was in that bag had taken me 11 weeks to put together. And Richard, my husband of 44 years, had no idea it existed. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I am 69 years old, and I want to be precise about that because precision matters in this story. Not 68, not almost 70, not getting up there. 69. I have all my teeth, both my hips, a sharp memory for numbers, and a filing system in my home office that my accountant once called, and I am quoting him directly, better organized than most small businesses I work with. I raised 2 children, Megan and Daniel, in a 4-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio. I cooked, I cleaned, I drove carpool, I sat on the PTA, and I volunteered at the library on Tuesday afternoons for 11 years. I also quietly managed the household finances, filed our taxes every April, negotiated our car insurance, and kept a spreadsheet tracking every major expense we'd had since 1987. Richard knew none of this, or rather, Richard knew in the abstract that the bills were paid. He simply never asked how. He had a way of making that seem natural. Richard was the one with the job title, the business cards, the firm handshake at the country club. He talked about money the way certain men do, loudly, confidently, and with very little specific knowledge. He'd say things like, "The market did well this quarter," and nod as if he personally had something to do with it. I never corrected him. I didn't see the point. What I didn't understand, not for a long time, was that I was making a mistake. Not by staying quiet, by letting him believe that my silence meant I wasn't paying attention. I was always paying attention. The first time I noticed something had changed was at dinner, about 2 years before the hospital. Daniel was visiting, and I mentioned something about the utility bill. There'd been a discrepancy. The previous month was $40 higher than it should have been for the season. I'd already called the company and had them check the meter. Richard looked at Daniel and said, pleasantly, with a smile, "Your mother doesn't need to worry about that. That's what I'm here for." Daniel nodded and changed the subject. I sat with my fork in my hand and felt something go cold in my stomach. Not anger, not yet. More like recognition, the way you recognize a smell before you can name it. After that dinner, I started watching more carefully. And once I started watching, I couldn't stop seeing it. The mail. Richard had always checked it first, and that was just habit. He'd always been the one to come home first in the years when I picked the kids up from school. But now I noticed he was taking longer at the mailbox, sorting through things before he came inside. One afternoon, I walked out to meet him, just to stretch my legs, and I saw him slide something into his jacket pocket. A letter from our bank. When I asked about it later, he said it was nothing, just an advertisement. I checked our online account that night. There was a new authorized signatory on the account, a name I didn't recognize. When I asked Richard, he said the bank had required it, something about estate planning, that he'd had his lawyer handle it, that I didn't need to worry about the details. He reached across the counter and said, in that voice he used when he was managing me, "You've never liked dealing with the bank people, Ellie. I'm just trying to make it easier on you. Ellie." He only called me Ellie when he was managing me. At my annual physical that March, I sat on the exam table while my doctor reviewed my blood work and asked routine questions. Richard was there. He'd started coming to my appointments, which I had told myself was sweet, a sign that he was thinking about our health as something we shared. But in that office, when Dr. Hensley asked me how I was sleeping, Richard answered first. "She wakes up disoriented sometimes," he said, "confused about where she is. I'm watching it." I don't wake up confused. I wake up at 6:15 every morning. I drink my coffee, and I do the crossword puzzle in ink. I have never in my life been disoriented in my own bedroom, but I sat there in that paper gown and said nothing because I was so thrown by the lie that I didn't know where to begin. Dr. Hensley made a note. In the car on the way home, I stared out the passenger window and thought, he's building something. I didn't know what yet, but I knew the shape of it. I'd seen the same shape in the way certain men at Richard's firm had talked about their wives over the years. Dismissively, preemptively, like women who needed to be managed rather than listened to. I had always assumed that was about those men, about their particular marriages. I had never thought to apply it to mine. 3 weeks later, I found the folder. It was in the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath a hanging folder, labeled insurance in his handwriting. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the receipt for the furnace inspection because I needed it for the home warranty claim. Richard was at his golf game. I had the house to myself. The folder was manila, unlabeled. Inside was a collection of things that, taken individually, could have innocent explanations. A brochure for a continuing care retirement community in Westerville. Glossy, the kind with a smiling woman in a cardigan on the cover. A business card from a real estate agent with a handwritten note on the back. Best time to list, spring. A photocopy of the deed to our house, which I already knew Richard had, but which had been annotated in pencil with a question mark beside my name as a co-owner. And a yellow legal pad page, 3 lines in Richard's handwriting. Get Eleanor declared unable to manage decisions. Consult R. Marsh, R.E., guardianship. Check timing with Daniel. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. The furnace receipt was in my hand. I was aware of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking at something. The world was completely ordinary, and I was holding a page that told me my husband of 44 years had been planning, quietly and deliberately, to have me declared legally incompetent. not because I was incompetent, because I was inconvenient. I took a photograph of every page in that folder with my phone. I put the folder back exactly as I found it. I found the furnace receipt. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea and sat at the table for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to do the next thing. Then I called my daughter. Megan lives in Denver. She's the younger one, the one Richard has always called dramatic, because she has opinions and states them. She drove her mother to the airport the year I went to see my college roommate in Portland, and she calls every Sunday at 10, and she has never once in her life told me to stop worrying about something without first letting me finish the sentence. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I had found. I read her the 3 lines from the yellow legal pad. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Mom, how long has this been going on?" I told her about the bank account, the doctor's appointment, the mail, the way he had started answering for me in stores, at the pharmacy, even once at the hardware store when the clerk had asked me what size pipe fitting I needed. And I knew the answer. And Richard spoke first. Megan was quiet again. Then, "I'm going to give you a name. Write it down." Grace Miller, attorney, specializing in elder law estate planning and what her firm called, in careful language, financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. I called her office the next morning. She had an opening on Thursday. I drove myself. Grace was in her mid-50s, precise and calm, the kind of person who takes notes by hand and then types them up correctly later. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. How were the assets currently titled? Whether I had ever signed anything related to a power of attorney or medical directive, and whether Richard had my current medical provider's contact information. The answers were jointly yes. A medical power of attorney I'd signed years ago naming Richard as my representative, not knowing the full weight of what that meant. And yes, he did. Grace set down her pen and said simply, "Then the first thing we do is change those documents. Today, before anything else." Over the next 11 weeks, with Grace's guidance, I did the following. I revoked the existing medical power of attorney and created a new one naming Megan as my health care representative. I created a durable financial power of attorney, also naming Megan, to take effect only if I were to become incapacitated. A word that, I now understood, had a specific legal meaning, not the loose and weaponizable meaning Richard had been preparing to assign it. I had an independent physician, not Dr. Hensley, conduct a cognitive assessment and provide a written letter attesting to my full decision-making capacity. I established a revocable living trust that placed our home and several investment accounts under terms Richard could not modify without my signature. And I sent written notice to our bank revoking the unauthorized signatory Richard had added without my knowledge. I did all of this quietly. I did it during Richard's golf mornings and his Thursday poker game. I paid Grace's retainer from a separate account I had opened years ago in my name alone, something I had done without particular foresight. I had simply wanted a place to put the birthday money from my mother back when she was alive. I had never mentioned it to Richard. He had never asked. 11 weeks. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. It was a Tuesday in November. I woke up at 6:15 as usual, but when I stood up from the bed, there was a pressure in my chest. Not sharp, not the crushing thing they warn you about, but real and wrong, like a hand pressing lightly on my sternum from the inside. I sat back down on the edge of the bed. I took a breath. The pressure was still there. Richard was already in the bathroom. I could hear the shower. I sat on the edge of the bed for 3 minutes, timing it against the clock on the nightstand, measuring whether the pressure changed. It didn't. I called out to him through the bathroom door and told him I didn't feel right and that I thought we should go to the hospital. He came out with a towel around his waist and looked at me. "How bad is it? Are you sure you're not just anxious?" I told him I was sure. In the car, he was quiet for a long stretch of highway. Then, at the light before the hospital entrance, he said, "Just let me do the talking when we get inside." I looked at my own hands on my lap. I had my bag with me. The blue folder was inside it. I had carried it with me every day for 6 weeks, just in case. The triage nurse asked me my name, my date of birth, my symptoms. Richard answered my name correctly and my date of birth correctly, and described my symptoms as confusion and chest discomfort, which was, and I want to be clear about this, a lie. I had chest discomfort. I did not have confusion. I had been lucid enough to notice, to measure, to call out to him through a bathroom door, and to bring the correct documents in the correct bag. The triage nurse looked at me. I said clearly, "Pressure in my chest. No confusion. I've been fully oriented." Richard gave a small, patient smile, the smile of a man managing a difficult situation. The nurse logged it and sent us back. We were put in a room. The curtain closed, and that was when it started in earnest. Nurse Carla came in to take my history. She introduced herself, confirmed my name, and began asking questions. Standard intake, medications, allergies, prior hospitalizations, family history. Richard answered 3 questions before she had finished asking them. My current medications. "She takes things. I'll get you the list." My allergies. Penicillin, I think. She forgets the others. My last hospitalization. Knee surgery 3 years ago. She doesn't remember the details. I do remember the details. It was my left knee. The surgeon's name was Dr. Farouk. It was a Wednesday. I was home in 4 days. Nurse Carla paused. She looked at me. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'd like to hear from you directly, if that's okay." Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Almost. "She has difficulty with these questions," he said. "It's better if I appreciate that," Nurse Carla said. "Can you give us a moment, please?" He blinked. Nobody had ever asked him to give them a moment before. He looked at me. I looked at Nurse Carla. "She's my wife," he said. "I understand," she said. "I just need to assess her independently. It's standard procedure." He stepped back, not out. He stayed in the room, but back by the curtain with his arms crossed. Nurse Carla turned to me and went through the list. I answered every question correctly, completely, and in order. Medications by name and dosage, both my allergies, the name of my surgeon, the date of my last procedure, the dates of all hospitalizations in the past 10 years, including a brief one in 2019, for a kidney stone that Richard would not have been able to name if you'd asked him. Nurse Carla finished writing. There was a small silence. "And your emergency contact? Who should we list?" Richard started to speak. I was faster. "My daughter Megan," I said. "I have the documentation here." I opened my bag. I took out the blue folder. I handed it to Nurse Carla. "The first page is the medical power of attorney," I said. "The second is the revocation of the prior authorization. The third is a letter from Dr. Okonkwo confirming my cognitive capacity, dated 6 weeks ago." Nurse Carla opened the folder. She read the first page, then the second. By the time she got to the third, Richard had moved away from the curtain and was standing in the center of the room. "She doesn't know what she signed," he said. "She was confused when she signed those." Nurse Carla looked up from the folder. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Richard. "I signed them in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary," I said, after consulting with an attorney for 11 weeks. Read the date on the capacity letter. Richard reached for the folder. Nurse Carla moved it back slightly, not dramatically, just out of reach. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, "these documents appear to be legally executed. I need to proceed accordingly." He looked at her. He looked at me. I watched something shift in his face. A recalibration, the kind you see in a person who realizes for the first time that the situation they thought they controlled is not what they thought it was. Nurse Carla excused herself briefly. She came back with a social worker, a calm, middle-aged woman named Patricia, who introduced herself and said she'd been asked to join us for a few minutes. This was also standard, Patricia explained. Any time there was a question about a patient's represented interests, they liked to have a social worker present. Richard objected. He used the word unnecessary 3 times. He mentioned that he was my husband and had been for 44 years. Patricia listened to all of it, nodded, and then turned to me and asked if I would like to speak with her privately. I said yes. Richard was asked to wait in the hallway. He went. The curtain closed. Patricia asked me simply and directly whether I felt safe, whether I had been pressured, whether the documents I had provided reflected my genuine wishes. I told her yes, they did, and I told her why I had created them. I told her about the folder in the filing drawer, the bank account, the doctor's appointment, the 3 lines on the yellow legal pad. I asked if I could make a phone call. Patricia said of course. I called Grace. "Eleanor," she said, "are you all right?" "Where are you?" I told her. She asked if she could speak with Patricia. I handed over the phone. I watched Patricia listen, nod twice, and say, "I understand, and yes, we have it here." She handed the phone back to me. "You've done everything right," Grace said. "The hospital has what they need. I'm going to make some calls now. You focus on your health." I thanked her. I hung up. And for the first time that morning, maybe for the first time in 2 years, I felt the full weight of what I had been carrying, and the particular lightness that comes when you finally set it down somewhere safe. Outside the curtain, Richard waited. He did not know that Grace's some calls included a call to R. Marsh, the attorney Richard had consulted about guardianship, to formally notify him that his prospective client's wife had independent legal representation and had been found cognitively competent by an independent physician. Nor did he know that Grace had already sent a letter to our bank that morning. She'd been waiting for a trigger date we had agreed on weeks earlier, formally asserting my rights as co-owner and requesting documentation of all recent changes to the account. He waited in the hallway for 40 minutes while they ran an EKG and took blood and determined that my heart, while stressed, had not been damaged. Mild cardiac event, possibly stress-induced. Rest. Follow-up. Monitoring. When they let him back in, Richard stood by the door, and I could see him trying to find the shape of what had happened, the way you try to find your footing on ice that has shifted. He didn't say much in the room. He sat in the chair by the wall, and we were both quiet, and the monitor beeped steadily, and the fluorescent light above my head buzzed the same way it had at the beginning. In the car, going home, he finally said something. "I was trying to protect you." I looked out the window. Columbus in November is gray and particular, stripped-down trees, and the kind of sky that feels like a ceiling. I'd always loved it. I'd lived there most of my adult life. "Protect me from what, Richard?" He didn't answer, which was an answer. "You went behind my back," he said. "I protected myself," I said. "There's a difference." We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. At home, I made tea. He went to his office. That evening after dinner, he tried once more, a softer version, the one where he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "Ellie, we can fix this, whatever you think you found." I said it quietly, his own words back to him. "Get Eleanor declared unable to manage decisions." He moved his hand back. I called Grace the next morning. The following month, I moved into the guest room. The month after that, Grace filed on my behalf. The process was not simple or fast or painless. None of it was. But the house was in the trust. The accounts were properly titled. The documents were in order. Richard's attorney called Grace twice, then went quiet. Daniel called me. He'd spoken to his father. He said he hadn't known, or he hadn't understood. And I believe him partly in the way you believe people when you love them and want there to be something left when the difficult part is over. We talked for an hour. He cried. I didn't. "I know you didn't plan it with him, Daniel," I said. "But you didn't ask me either. And that's the part I need you to think about." He said he understood. We agreed to talk more. We have been. Megan flew out the week everything was filed. She slept in the guest room across the hall from me for 5 days and drank coffee at my kitchen table every morning and didn't ask me how I was feeling every 5 minutes, which was exactly what I needed. She just sat there, present. On the last morning before her flight, she said, "You planned all of this while he was at golf." "He was gone a lot of Thursdays," I said. She laughed. I laughed too. It was the first time I'd laughed in a while, and it felt like something unlocking. That was several months ago. I am still in the house. My house, correctly titled, which Richard cannot sell or refinance or use as a bargaining piece without my signature on a document I have no intention of signing. I see Dr. Okonkwo regularly. My heart is stable. I do the crossword in ink. I file my own taxes. I check the mail when I feel like it. What I want to say at the end of all this is something that took me a long time to understand. I am not remarkable. I am not brave in some exceptional, unusual way. I am a 69-year-old woman from Columbus, Ohio, who once had a separate savings account because my mother used to send me birthday money, and I wanted somewhere to keep it. That account and 11 Thursdays and a lawyer named Grace is what changed everything. The morning in the hospital, Richard told the nurse to ignore me because I was confused. He said it easily. He'd said it so many times in private, in small ways, over 2 years, that it had started to feel to him like a fact he was simply reporting. That's how these things work. They start as dismissals and become gradually a story someone is telling about you. A story that, if you're not careful, starts to feel true even to you. But I was not confused. I was 69 years old, with a blue folder in my bag, and I had been paying attention the whole time. My husband told the nurse to ignore me, and the only person in that room who left without a voice was him.